Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, everyone. The topic for today's webinar is how to create well-being and behaviour change that improves performance. Your hosts today are myself on the left-hand side of your screen, Stuart Banbury. So I'm the marketing manager at Social Sign-In. I'm going to be hosting today's webinar, and that handsome gentleman in full flow to my right-hand side is Matt Fowler, leading performance coach to brands like Vimto and Expedia. So I'm going to be speaking just for a few moments at the start, just to kind of set the scene and set some context in terms of some of the struggles that we're seeing around highly pressurized, high volume environments such as marketing and customer service. And then Matt's going to talk to you for the next 30 minutes or so, just to give you some great techniques and insights to show you how you can perform better and change those behaviours in some of these stressful environments. Just a couple of pieces of housekeeping before we get started. So if you do want to ask any questions, please log into YouTube and then you can ask these questions in the chat box in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Because we're doing a live broadcast through YouTube today, a recording of this webinar will be automatically taken. So if you do have to dip off early, or if you'd like to rewatch it or share it with a colleague, then we'll be sending out a recording via email over the next couple of days. So just a couple of slides. I know we've got a mixture of customers and non-customers on the webinar today. So a couple of slides in terms of who we are here at Social Sign-In, for those of you not as familiar with us. So we work with medium to large enterprises from every different vertical sector. And you can see a snapshot of some of these on your screen at the moment. We help all of these different brands really harness the power of social media across customer service, marketing and PR to bring all their departments together to collaborate over one platform and produce incredible digital experiences for their customers. And this is the platform that all of these brands use. So as you can see, it's broken down into 4 distinct modules. So we have our customer service module where we create those really powerful customer experience moments. We have our marketing module where we schedule and publish a rich calendar of content. And then we use a suite of reports to really analyze which content is resonating with our audience. And we have our PR module. So that's where we listen to all of that chatter around our brand, around our industry, and really listen to our customers to understand their pain points, their challenges, and identify any opportunities. Then we take all that social data, we feed it back into our business, and we can make some really far-reaching business decisions. And we also have a mobile app, so you can stay closer than ever to your social media team and your customers. Now, we know that social media is such a real-time, fast-paced environment that we need to support our customers in the moment as they're supporting their own customers in the moment. So we offer real-time UK tech support based here in sunny Birmingham. We have a real high customer satisfaction rating that we're very proud of. And we also have a 1-minute response time on our live chat. So we try and support you guys in the moment and keep you moving as you're creating those amazing marketing campaigns and creating those powerful customer experience moments. I'm just going to hand you over to our guest host for today, Matt Fowler, who's going to give you a quick overview in terms of the work he does with incredible thinkers.
Afternoon, everyone. I think I've got the coolest job in the world because I get out of bed every morning and I inspire people to be the best they can be. And I guess incredible thinkers, what we do is we provide bespoke performance coaching and training solutions for a range of organizations. And it's my privilege to be able to talk to you today a little bit later on about some of my learnings and some things you can maybe take back to the workplace to work with your teams on. So looking forward to sharing that with you.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So before we get started, just to give some context, I think in terms of what's happening around different business challenges in 2018. Now, those of us that work in modern businesses, around customer experience, around marketing, I'm sure we're all familiar with some of these challenges that we're seeing on our screen at the moment. So we know that culture, particularly over the last 12 to 24 months, has been identified as a real key factor in terms of successful businesses. So we know there's going to be a real emphasis on that in terms of directors and management teams really trying to get that culture piece right. So that's going to be a real focus, I think, for quite a period of time going forward. We also know that businesses have to be very agile. and to be built on kind of shifting sands to cope with the rate of change that's out there within society at the moment. And that rate of change is only going to accelerate. So we know that operational change within a business needs to be common and frequent to meet that rate of change out there in society. I think time, although it's still cited as a main challenge for marketing, comms, customer service professionals, that challenge has been around for decades and decades. And I think as the pressures and demands on a business increase, that lack of time and individuals and professionals being quite time poor is going to kind of intensify. So I think, again, coping mechanisms around time, will be a key kind of factor for a lot of organizations going forward. And we also know that demand on businesses is growing year on year, but that demand isn't always being met with a growth in resource. So if we're not giving our customers a fantastic first experience of our new digital channels, for example, then they're just going to default back to telephone or email or whatever it might be. So if we're not giving them a great first experience when they come to us, it's very hard for us to influence their behavior going forward. I'm going to hand over to Matt now, who's going to talk for the next 20 or 30 minutes or so. If you do have any questions as we go through, please do drop them into the chat box in the right hand corner of your screen, and then we'll pick up some of those at the end and hopefully give you some really tailored, personalized advice. So for the next few minutes, Matt, it's over to you.
Thank you. So I'm going to start by talking to you about behaviour change. I think behaviour change is fascinating because it's probably one of the most simple things to describe for adults, but one of the hardest things to actually create and do. So I think we can all probably think about times where we've wanted to change something in our lives, but haven't been able to achieve it, whether that's our weight, our diet, work-life balance, and all of those things. And then what happens is we get thrown into organizations where we're expected then to create that positive behavioral change that we haven't been able to achieve ourselves in others. So I kind of think that's a wow moment. So I personally don't believe that organizations spend enough time helping their people understand the very basic fundamentals behind behavior change. And when we work with clients, that's where we always invite them to start. So let me share this model with you. So organizations need to see beneath the surface of their employees' behavior to make better decisions about selecting, promoting, and development. The iceberg model that you see in front of you provides a clear understanding of why people do what they do. Actually, the basis of this model is from Freud's iceberg model of consciousness. And what he argues is that what we see in terms of behavior is only 10%, the tip of the iceberg. It's the deeper motivator of our behavior. That's 90% of our mental nature that lies submerged in our subconscious or unconscious mind. So think of it like this. Often we see someone behaving at work in a way that's inappropriate, or we might believe they're obnoxious, and we can label them as having a bad attitude. But we believe passionately, if we want to drive positive behavioral change, it's all about actually getting under the surface of those behaviors and thinking about what the drivers of those behaviors are. And I'm going to introduce you now to a model that we use at Incredible Thinkers. So the first thing I would say about this model is that the first thing you see on this model would be, if we want to change the results of our employees, the first thing that we need to do is think about, well, what is it we need to change? And the first thing we need to change is their habits. If we want people to deliver better results, then they need to create better habits. But to create better habits, well, what is it we need to do? Well, we then need to think about their behavior, because their habits are just repeated behavior. It's interesting to note, though, that so how do we get people to behave differently? And let me give you this statistic, that all of our behavior, 100% of it, is driven by our emotions. So when our emotions are positive and good, then we're more likely to drive positive behavior that creates lasting and positive habits that gives us the results we want. But in ourselves and our employees, if those emotions are negative, that's likely to lead to poor behavior. That becomes a habit and gives us some of the results that we see. So if we really want to change our results, we have to first change our habits. If we really want to change our habits, we have to behave differently, consistently. If we really want to behave consistently differently, we've got to be more in tune with our emotions. And to change that, what we've got to do is then change the way we think and how we think on a conscious and a subconscious level. And let me give you a very real example from my life. So when I used to work in organizations, I used to be constantly attached to my BlackBerry. Used to work 80 or 90 hours a week. And the only time I used to switch off from reading emails was very much when I went away on holiday with my family. So I went away on holiday, on a particular holiday with my family, went to a glorious holiday in Turkey, and spent the first sort of 10 days so reconnecting with my young children and my wife and having a great time. Got back home on the day of my return. The first thing I did was turn on my BlackBerry, opened it up, and read emails that from all and sundry that I hadn't contacted for 2 weeks. And the first email was from the chief executive. And the chief executive had a pretty challenging time in some of my territory, and he sent me a challenging email. Basically, straight away, my emotions took control of me. My behaviour became what it had always been, and I snapped and got and shouted at my daughter, who I just spent the last 2 weeks reconnecting with. The result of that was that my daughter came nowhere near me when I was in work mode and I was reading emails, etc. It wasn't a great result for me. Let me give you an exact, honest story that happened at the same time. My son, who was slightly elder, ran upstairs, got his iPad, and basically opened his iPad up, ran downstairs and said, "Dad, I've got an email." So he got an email and he read it and he reacted very differently to me. I got an email and I reacted in a negative way. So we believe passionately, if you want to create different results in your people for yourselves, we have the ability to recontextualize the way we think about things and that largely is about reprogramming our subconscious. So I would suggest this to you guys. If you want to improve customer service in your team, rather than talking to them about changing their behavior, you've got to change the way they think about themselves, and they've got to change the way they think about the customer experience. If you want people to be more personally effective, you do well to change the way they think about time and choice management rather than just asking them to behave differently. And that's why so much training and coaching fails. It goes in at the behavioral level rather than changing the way in which people think. I think the world right now is both an exciting place to be in terms of new technology, some of which Stuart has alluded to, and can bring us a really rich life and can bring us real vitality. But the reality is that rapid change also brings with it a relentless amount of pace and stress and challenge for us and our employees. And the irony is that actually, while the world around us changes rapidly, our basic human needs don't change quite so much. So keeping up with the world we're creating at this time of great and increasing stress is really, really important. And we need to invest more time for ourselves and also our teams in coping with this stress. So let's imagine this scenario. I want you to think of yourselves and your employees as a tree. So the healthy tree roots extend through the dark earth to provide a stable foundation, right? And the tree's branches and shoots, as you can see there, stretch outwards in search of sun and air. But you all know that without both, a tree cannot grow. So what I'd like you all to think about is how can you, in this stressful world, for your employees and yourselves, can you help people grow their roots and their shoots? Well, let me give you some tips on how you can maybe do that. So the first one is, I would say, is for each of you as leaders or in your teams, is to keep a lid on your emotions and lead by example. And we work very hard with people to develop their emotional intelligence so that they don't let negative emotions rule them and others. The second thing we then talk about is around workplace wellness. So we all know that exercise and a healthy lifestyle is extremely important when it comes to combating workplace related stress. And there's loads of things that we help people think about in terms of employee wellness schemes. So you can pay for a proportion of an employee's gym membership. You can run group-wide healthy eating challenges. And it's a good way of helping employees unwind and feel better about themselves. I think the most successful companies now are investing in some sort of workplace wellness schemes, irrespective of size. The third thing you can do is to create some form of social activity. So employees spend a huge amount of time together with their co-workers, and it's important that they get along. it's important that they enjoy their time together. So think about what you can do to create a better office atmosphere that leads to productivity, creativity, and collaboration. So some of the things that some of our clients do successfully is and I'm sure you guys are doing some of this stuff, is I have one client who brings in once a week a motivational speaker to come in and talk to everyone in the office. There's one organization that has an hour each week where they play games and fun in the environment. They all, just basic things like spending time together at lunch or outside of the office. It really pains me when I see people eating lunch at their desks and in front of laptops, because social activity is a really good way of reducing stress, boosting morale and team building. The fourth point will be about allowing flexi time and remote working. In our experience, one of the major stress inducers, particularly for working parents, is the stringent working hours. So if you allow your employees to work remotely or employ some sort of flexi time scheme, it can boost morale and can thus boost profitability. So basically what you're saying to employees is, I trust you. We work massively and passionately with people to create and engender a culture of trust. And you allow them to manage their own time, and you take away some of those stress and considerations like childcare from working parents. And you just need to be sure to make sure that with the flexibility comes open communication, and that you outline clear expectations with parameters. And the final thing that we see people doing there is to communicate with their employees. Now that might seem very basic, but actually open communication is critical in leadership. So keeping your employees up to date regarding changes, expectations around their own performance, and also, how the business is doing. So it reduces the feelings of stress and anxiety, because there's nothing worse, is there, than being kept in the dark. But still, too many companies keep their employees in the dark. So the other thing about open communication, it becomes a two-way street, and you get to know the early warning signs. And people share concerns, ideas, and thoughts. And it just basically, to be honest, makes a much stronger working relationships and a healthier overall company culture. So what we're going to do now is talk about a bit more about communication and around better communication. So I believe in most of my one-to-one coaching work, and also in organizations, that a problem only ever exists in the absence of the right conversation. But what's interesting is how often people don't really prepare for having the right conversation. So they don't prepare the ground for the right conversation, and they don't plan to have the right conversation in their environment. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So for those marketeers amongst you, this slide will not be new news, but I want to use it in the context of how you prepare to have the right conversation. So I'm amazed at how many people still don't think about what they want people to do when they communicate with them, whether it's either one-to-one or indeed in a group setting. So communication at work, with our friends, with our loved ones, is all about getting someone to do something as a result of it. If people don't do anything as a result of your communication, then ultimately the communication hasn't worked. And to do that, I encourage people to think about these three things. So before you go into any communication scenario, what do you want people to think? What do you want them to learn or know after listening to you or reading your information? What do you want them to feel? What emotion or response do you want to evoke with your communication? Emotions are the most powerful thing, because you see from the earlier model, that's what feeds the behavior. And then finally, what do you want them to do? So what action do you want the audience to take? And if we put this in the context of something as simple as meetings, 75% of people in the organizations we work with, and research would back this up, suggest that meetings don't work for them. Well, I would suggest that's because the people who are holding the meetings don't prepare in a way that they think about what people want to think, feel, or do as a result of it. So always think about, from a communication perspective, working back from the think, feel, do, and prepare the above, and work backwards. So this picture, despite taking me back to my childhood, because I'm from a farming background, is quite powerful when we think about whether communication lands or not. So if you imagine a farmer doesn't sow seeds randomly on unprepared and unfertile ground. They spend hours preparing the ground and creating the environment where the seeds have the best chance to grow. Well, I want you to imagine that your communication is the seeds. You want whatever communication you sow to grow and for people to do things differently. And I want you to think about your employees, your people's mindsets as the ground. So the communication is the seeds, people's mindsets is the ground. So I want to talk to you a little bit, not about communication techniques, but more around how you can consistently prepare the ground for communication to land. So there are two mindsets you can have in life. Now, some of you in business will definitely have been exposed to fixed mindset or growth mindset thing. This is my take and a slightly different take on those concepts. So your employees can have a be good mindset. Okay, so a be good mindset relates to three things. If you have a be good mindset, you are someone who is focused on proving themselves. Everything you do is about proving yourself as an individual. It's about demonstrating your skills, yeah. And it's about performing better than others. And I think that's a fascinating one. So many of us have been brought up to believe that actually it's not about, we're not in competition with ourselves, but we're actually in competition with others. And fundamentally, that comes from our school days, from our sporting activities, etc. And it still makes me smile when I hear my parents in the schoolyard, when the kids come out and they've done a test or had a result, and they ask them where they came in the class and how they compared relative to Billy or Rachel or someone else. So those are all what we would call a be good mindset. And if you have a be good mindset, then your skills and ability, you believe your skills and abilities are fixed and you can't or shouldn't have to grow or develop. Well, the thing is about this be good mindset, how does it relate to communication? Well, think about it. If you have a be good mindset, feedback and communication, particularly around change or improving your performance, is going to be difficult to receive. So I just want you all to think about that. Now, if you as leaders and in your organizations can foster a different mindset, which is the be better mindset, then it will create much more powerful ground for communication and conversations to land and work. So in a be better mindset, proving actually becomes improving. So it's not about proving myself, it's actually about getting better at what I do. Performing better than others becomes it's about performing better than I did in the past. It's actually about competing with my own personal bests in the workplace. And then demonstrating skills becomes about developing skills. And the people with a be better mindset are those people who actually, they recognize that skills and abilities are not fixed, that we all have the ability to grow and develop. And that's where the magic happens. So there are some things you can do in your organizations to create a be better mindset. And here's just a few of them that I'd like to share with you. So the first one, and most importantly, is to present skills as learnable. So it's to not talk about, so whether it's presentation skills, whether it's emotional intelligence, whether it's around leadership skills, is for you to present those and talk about them in your organizations as being learnable. The second thing is to convey value learning and perseverance, not just ready-made talent. So what I mean by that is that's actually about recognizing the effort and achievement that goes into achieving results rather than the result itself. And I think that's really important for us all as leaders and equally important for us as parents and as friends. The other thing around that is I would challenge all of you to think about how you embrace and encourage failure in your organizations. Most of the organizations, when we first get exposed to them, believe that they encourage risk-taking, entrepreneurial spirit, but the thing that actually, when we get them to look at it, they realize they're not doing is they are coming down very, very hard on failure and mistakes, and people have a fear of that. in their organization. So try and convey, a culture of making mistakes. And we call failure or fail, we ask people to reframe how they think about this and embrace it in a different way. And we call fail the first action in learning. You may well have heard that before. Now, the key word in there is learning, because we're not advocates of getting people to repeat the same mistakes. But actually, if you have a culture of encouraging people to make mistakes and then help them learn from them, you will create a be better mindset environment. The third thing you can do is to give feedback in a way that promotes learning. And the final thing is to present yourselves as managers and leaders as a resource for learning, which I think is really, really important. So they're not just people there, to give permission, to coach, etc., but they are available as a resource for learning. So there's 4 things we can all do and practice in our organizations to make sure we create a be better mindset. Communication, conversations will much better land when you work very, very hard to have a be better mindset in organizations. So let's now move on and talk about well-being. There's a very famous quote attributed to Gandhi where he says, "Be the change you seek." And we're massive advocates of that at Incredible Thinkers. Yeah. Or another way of thinking about it relates to us, as we'll all be able to remember this example from the last time we flew, is that what the air cabin crew do is that when they're talking about all the emergency procedures, they all ask us to fit our own oxygen mask first. Yeah. So I think it's really important for all of us as leaders and as friends, parents, family members to be the change we seek and to fit our own oxygen mask first. When I first started working with Incredible Thinkers, I went to see a company who were very outwardly successful, and the chief executive said to me, "Here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to basically do some work with all my team and fix them." And I said, "Can I spend some time with them, etc.?" And after probably 6 or 7 hours of conversations and dialogue, I came back to him and said, "Really, we ought to start with you." And I think that's really, really important, that as leaders, that we are the change we seek, we role model, and we fit our own oxygen mask first. So let's talk a little bit more about why that's important. Well, as leaders, we have a direct influence on the culture we create. So if we want to create a culture of well-being, then we have to recognize our influence on creating that cultural change. So the first thing is, well, what do we focus our attention on? What do we ask about? What do we measure? So that's the first thing that we need to recognize as leaders, where we have a direct influence. We then have to think about, as leaders, do we actually walk the talk? So let's just use the example about what you spend attention on. So let's just say you go back and you're working hard in your organizations around creating that culture of well-being. You're balancing, building strong, deep roots, as we talked about before, and also encouraging people to branches and shoots to reach out. But then all you ever talk to them about is the KPIs. Well, ultimately, what you focus on your attention will undermine the efforts you're making. So in terms of your role modeling, well, do you show and practice the ways of working and thoughts that you espouse? Do you do that? What do you reward? Because the criteria that you use as leaders will signal what is truly valued. So not what you say, but what you reward. We have a belief at Incredible Thinkers that if you want something to grow, then pour champagne on it. Obviously not literally, that can be quite expensive. But in real terms, if you want to create a culture around well-being, then when you see people investing in that and the benefits that's bringing, then make a real song and dance about it and make them feel good and recognize that with other people. So selection and dismissal is important. So what criteria do leaders use to recruit, promote, and fire people? And actually, the final thing is, how do you react to crises? So it's very easy, isn't it, to captain a ship in calm waters, but actually it's much harder when the seas are choppy and there's a storm. And let me tell you, when your team are looking for how much you believe in well-being and you believe in its importance, they'll be looking not for how things are going when performance is great and things are going well, but actually how you perform and how you work in tough times. So I just want you to be all aware as leaders that you are drivers of culture. Imagine yourselves as a stone every day that's dropped in a pool, and the ripples go far and wide. And if those ripples are cast and are really positive, they can have a lasting and positive effect. And equally, if those ripples are negative, you will have a long-term negative influence on the well-being culture you're looking to create. So think about this. You are watched more critically than you can ever imagine. There are lots of people who are quite humble in leadership roles, and they still don't realize, even though they're humble and they're part of the team and their leadership style is great, that they are still, because of their title and status, they are still watched more critically than they can imagine. As we talked about earlier, your actions have a bigger impact than you can ever imagine. Yeah, so you can spend weeks and weeks fostering a well-being culture, but that one day you turn up to work and you're not in control of your emotions, that can potentially undo everything you've done, and that experience will spread like wildfire through the office. So your actions do have a wider impact than you can imagine. And the other interesting thing is that people's conclusions are deeper than you can imagine as well. So from that point of view, there is a thing that exists in all of us called confirmation bias, whereas if we believe something, we seek to find evidence to support it. So if your people's conclusions can be based on the fact that they believe something about you, your commitment to well-being, your commitment to supporting them and creating the culture you want, and it runs deeper than you imagine. So guys, just be awareness of your role as leaders in terms of driving culture. So let's talk about some of the things that I believe that I've seen other individuals, other leaders and organizations adopt that have helped them create, look after themselves and fit their own oxygen mask first and be positive role models in the way we've described. So let me introduce you to the concept of the learning zone and the performance zone. So there are two zones that we can spend our time in as employees and as leaders. And let's talk about all of you on the call. So in the performance zone, it's very much around delivering performance today, immediate performance. I want you to think of it like that. In the learning zone, it's actually all about growth and future performance. And actually, things that can go on in the learning zone are the very things we've been talking about thus far, which is about helping us cope with the stress and anxiety that we can experience through the relentless pace of change. So let's look at some of the different goals, activities, what you concentrate on, and mistakes, and what happens to mistakes in those two zones. So the goal in the learning zone is to improve. So when you're in that zone, it is all about improvement and getting better at something. While when you're in the performance zone, it's actually just about doing the best we can. It's about delivering that immediate performance. So the activities you therefore take in the learning zone are different to those in the performance zone. So in the learning zone, you're focused on improvement. In the performance zone, you're focused on execution. It's just about getting the job done. In terms of what you concentrate on, well, in the learning zone, you concentrate on what you haven't mastered yet. And in the performance zone, you clearly focus on what you have mastered. And then finally, in terms of mistakes, well, when you're in the learning zone, you're expected to make mistakes. You expect it yourself, and other people expect that of you because you're learning. Whereas in the performance zone, you expect those mistakes to be minimized because it's all about not making mistakes and getting the job done. So why am I talking to you about these two zones in terms of your own well-being? Well, let me give you a real example around about what the learning zone looks like, because I would suggest to you this, that most people in the workplace spend most of their time in the performance zone because that's what they choose to do, and that's what we believe our organizations demand on us. But if we really, really want to be the best that we can be, and that's what we're helping people to do at Incredible Thinkers, we have to think about the learning zone, future growth, and our future potential. So let me tell you what I believe working in the learning zone looks like. And Stuart and I have had some fun today already talking about this chap who is Demosthenes. Now, Demosthenes is a very famous ancient Greek orator, lawyer, and political leader. And the reason I share his story with you is because actually he illustrates brilliantly for me the difference between the learning zone and the performance zone. So his performance zone as a lawyer was clearly around the law, about being good in court, and he invested quite a lot of time in staying up to date with the law. But he spent equally as much time in his learning zone. So what did that look like for him? Well, very simply, he realized that actually to be a great lawyer, well, probably he needed to be a great influencer, a great orator, and he needed to be actually a great actor to persuade jurors and the court, to be persuasive with his arguments. So he spent a lot of his time spending time with actors and orators and observing speecher writers. He then realized that actually he got some feedback. They had a really odd habit of when he was presenting of lifting his right shoulder. So what did he do? He spent hours and hours practicing speaking in front of the mirror, actually with a sword hanging down, that actually every time he lifted his shoulder, it pricked up against the sword, thus training himself not to lift his shoulder. And the final thing he did, which I thought was really interesting, is that actually what he used to do is spend time by the sea projecting his voice, and so that he could actually overcome the very noisy courts in there. So I'd ask you all to think about, in terms of your own well-being, around managing the stress and challenges of the demanding environment. How much time do you spend in your performance zone versus your learning zone? I'm just going to talk to you now about a very quick, delightful, actually, metaphor about our reliance on our unconscious mind. So you'll see in a minute a picture of a rider and elephant. And basically, I want you to think of yourselves as the conscious part of the brain is actually is the rider, and the subconscious, unconscious part of the brain is actually the elephant. And what's really fascinating about human beings is we like to think that most of the time that the rider is in control of the elephant, but in reality, it's really, if we look at the size and scale, more often than not, it's the elephant that is in charge. So if we want to have great well-being and we want to be the change we seek, we do well to look after our elephant. So let me tell you some ways in which we encourage people to look after their elephant. And none of what I'm going to tell you now, guys, is actually rocket science. But what's really fascinating is, while you may know most of what we're doing, actually how much of it are you actually doing? So this is about bridging the gap between knowing and doing. So the first tip I would talk to you about is sleep. So going without sleep, as you probably all know from personal experience, particularly those of you who are parents who have demanding jobs, is extremely bad for our minds. So I just want all of you to think about how you can create more quality sleep, because sleep deprivation makes us less alert, impairs our mental performance, and has a similar effect on the mind as being drunk. So you'll all know what a great night's sleep looks like for you. So if you want to be great at work, think about how you create that. The next thing I want to talk to you about is actually our general physical health and how it affects our minds. Taking care of our body is a great way to take care of our mind. So even gentle physical activity is beneficial, and vigorous activity can reduce stress and anxiety and boost mood and well-being. I'm amazed at the amount of people in offices who actually spend all their day in that environment and don't go out and get some fresh air and a walk. So I would encourage each of you every day to get away from your desk, go and have a walk, and don't let the weather in this country put you off. It's going to help you in your cognitive abilities and be your best at work. The next thing I want to talk to you about is sunlight. So it's not just pleasant, particularly the last few weeks in the UK, but it's also good for our minds. So natural light, most of us know that. This helps us sleep better at night and promotes vitamin D production, which is good for mental alertness and general well-being. And a watch out for all of you, if you stay in that office environment, fluorescent lights can and often make us feel stressed. So there's another opportunity for you to get away from your desk and to get outside, whether it's to make a phone call or to just generally recharge. So get out and about and get some natural light. What we eat and drink affects our minds as much more than most of us realize. So we all know that managing our diet is a simple and effective way to improve mental well-being. Just have a look around your office and check when you how many people are bringing in sweets, biscuits, cakes, and that type of thing. So food gives us our mind's energy, and when we get the right energy, the right food, from things like porridge and pulses, we're much likely to have better concentration and mental energy. And equally, we're all aware of the highs and lows of sugary foods and caffeine. So I'd really challenge you all to look at what you do and what your teams do around nutrition and healthy eating in the workplace. Water deserves a special mention. I think it's one of the best ways to look after your mind and drink more water. So I just say simply this. If you ever get thirsty, you're not hydrated enough, we encourage people to drink 4 litres of water a day. And in that way, you're going to stay mentally alert, be more emotionally in control, and get closer to being the best that you can be. And positive contact with other people is also very important for our minds, We have a tendency, and you probably felt this already today in your workplace, is to tune into the emotional states of others. So if you're doing that, beware of the negative impact that people can have on you. So have positive contact with other people, and we'll talk a little bit more about that before I sign off. And the other thing, interestingly, it's believed that actually we become the sum total of the 5 people we spend most time with. So I just say this to all of you, choose wisely. So the next picture you're going to see is a picture of a radiator in a drain. And for me, a radiator is an individual who emits energy, warmth, and somebody we like to spend time with and huddle around. And just really, we get that feel-good factor when we speak to them. And equally, on that picture you're seeing now, there are drains in life, and all of you will know them. But if we think about your own oxygen mask and being the change you seek, I would just say this to all of you. Until you make a decision every day to get out of bed and be a radiator, you'll never really have that true positive feel-good factor with you and your teams, because they're looking to you. Remember that slide around culture, to bring that to work. Now, that doesn't mean that we live in fluffy bunny land and that everything is always positive, but it does mean that everything we face in life, whatever challenges we have, we do it with a positive attitude. Now, lots of drains when they get together. We like to call them people who have this. They have pity parties. And I think, for all the efficiency drives you're doubtless doing in your organizations, all of the great work you're doing, one of the biggest enemies of productivity is what we call the pity party. So I would just say this to you, don't attend them and don't host them, and as a leader, role model those things in your organizations. And any of the businesses who we work with, one of the first things we do is challenge them to reframe how they think about how they spend time together, and to turn all of their conversations to solutions and positivity rather than dwelling and having pity parties. So that's it from me. So hopefully you found that useful to share a number of tips and from our work with clients, etc. So I'll hand back to Stuart.
Cheers, Matt. That was fantastic. Thank you very much. If you did see anything today that kind of strikes a chord with your organisation or you personally, just drop it into the chat box. We'll be around for a couple of minutes now to answer any questions that you've got. Just a couple of thoughts that occurred to me that I'd like to just kind of throw at Matt. So hopefully I don't put him on the spot too much here. But I know it's fantastic that the theme of well-being and work-life balance is so high on the agenda in the media and things like that now. But I think maybe still potentially within the workplace, people aren't aware personally of how they can achieve better work-life balance or being open to some of these wellness schemes. So are there any kind of bits of advice you can give around that?
Yeah, well, I would say this: the first thing you've got to do is to decide what work-life balance you want and what's working for you and what isn't, because basically we're all, whether we like it or not, choosing the work-life balance we've got. So I think the first thing I would say, Stu, is to get individuals to actually sit down and think about what work-life balance they'd like to achieve and what they'd like to design, and then have a real think about what's stopping them. And then why not create some conversations back in the workplace? And I see people doing this quite positively, where you can help and learn from other people around what they're doing, because success leaves clues, and everybody who wants to achieve what we've achieved has done it. Sorry, there are lots of people out there who've done what we want to achieve already. So go and find the clues. But I think a good, healthy dialogue, once you've decided what you want to change with people in the workplace, can be really, really positive.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So we've just had a question come through from Sam Rametzi. Forgive me if I've pronounced that incorrectly, but the question is, and I know this is a particular interest of yours, Matt, is kind of what impact, if any, can social media have on you as a leader? I'm guessing that's kind of good or bad.
Okay, yeah. Well, listen, we could talk about this for hours, but let me tell you, I think it can have a hugely positive impact, and I think it can have a negative impact. So let me give you my view. The first one would be this. On a positive sense, I think what social media gives you is access to some tremendous thought leadership and access to lots of materials and thinking that I think can change the way you think. So I think social media can be really positive. It can be a really positive way of staying connected with your teams. Yeah, if we talk about creating that social context. So loads of great stuff you can do with social media. But I always say this to people about social media, that it's a good servant but a bad master. And increasingly what I think, how it can have an impact on you as a leader is that it can provide you with a huge amount of distraction. And what I particularly see in organizations is leaders who are, whether it's in one-to-one conversations or whether it's with teams, they're seeing social media, particularly through technology, as a distraction.
Okay, fantastic.
So switch off your phones when you're talking to people, guys.
Tip of the day. Okay, so just staying on the theme of leaders for a moment. So we've spoken about being the change that we seek in others. So who in your books, some examples of kind of great leaders and kind of why is that?
Okay, so I think I probably shouldn't start talking about some of the clients I work with right now, but I tell you what. Somebody who I think is brilliant in this space and somebody I look up to. So if you don't follow him or look at him, I think have a look at the work of Simon Sinek. I think Simon Sinek is a real thought leader in this ideological space around the cultures we can create. So I would, and he tells some fantastic stories about great leaders. So I would point all of you in the direction of Simon Sinek. Somebody I'm in contact with and somebody I admire greatly. Okay,
fantastic. Okay, so just to kind of maybe one more question before we finish off. It's kind of 10 to 2 now. So we've had a question come through from Nick Wood, who asks, do you believe every business should create an internal role or advocate for workplace well-being? And what role should HR have that in?
Okay, so the answer to the first part of the question, Nick, would be I think as leaders, we should, as I said before, we should role model these behaviours. I think the danger of having an internal role, an advocate, would be that it becomes seen as that person's job. And I think I'm a massive believer in creating the environment where everyone steps into that space and it doesn't become one person's job and it becomes collaborative. So my steer would be, and I've seen more positive examples of where people have taken a more collaborative approach. And I think I'm not sure what role HR should have in that. I think what you need is change agents in every organisation, and I don't think that should necessarily come from a specific function. I think if you're inspired and you're engaged in this space, I think you can make stuff happen. So go and light some fires, guys. I would say in that, irrespective of your discipline or background.
Okay. Thanks, Matt. And finally, you mentioned earlier about a good night's sleep. We all like a good night's sleep. I know that's an area that I can certainly improve on. So how do we kind of switch off from the stresses and strains of kind of modern business life and try and get a good night's sleep? Okay, well, I think great question. I would say this, that it's not about, you all know when you've had a good night's sleep and how you feel. For some people, for me, that's 7 hours. For my wife, that's nearer 12. And etc. And for you will be all variations in between. Just so you know, if you believe you're good after 4 hours sleep, there's a lot of research that says those people who exist like that are potentially harming themselves in the long term. But whatever that number looks like for you, I think the key thing is about creating what they call the transition zone. So you transition from you being alert and awake, and you create some space, time, and reflection. Before you switch into a sleep mode. So that could be typically for me and people I know, that could be simply switching off technology, not watching the television. LED backlit devices are really terrible because they stimulate the chemicals in the brain that make you feel like you're awake. Reading a book. I know people who meditate, etc., etc. So I think my tip there will be is to create the transition zone. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Matt. Okay, it's kind of getting on towards 2 o'clock now. So hopefully you've left some time in there to have your lunch. But I just want to thank Matt for joining us today. It's been wonderful to kind of hear some of his insights and tips around how we can create well-being and behaviour change that improves performance. If you want to find out any more about how we at Social Signing help hundreds of medium to large enterprises really harness the power of social media through our technology, then you can contact us using the details on your screen now. Likewise, I really would suggest you give Matt and the guys at Incredible Thinkers a follow on social media. They do some incredible work and share some great thought leadership content. I think it's, we try and do these webinars every month or so and get a different guest speaker on, whether that's from within a brand to give you a bit of a peek behind the curtains, or someone like Matt just to kind of share his observations and skills and expertise from working across a broad range of sectors. So do look out on your emails for our next webinar coming up soon. And thank you for joining us today.
Cheers. Bye-bye.